you can't really trust yourself when your ground is polluted with shame. So it's like, you got to do the excavating. You got to excavate all the poison that made you believe that you were less than, that you were broken, that there's something wrong with you, that you're unlovable. And then you can start to rebuild that foundation on trust.
Life is all about relationships. Lovers, family, body, or money. How satisfied you are can be completely explained by how you relate to things around you. This is Sophie Jaffe, and together with my husband, Dr. Adi Jaffe, we are here to explore and teach you how to maximize your relationships and achieve a happier life. Let's get ignited.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Ignited Relationships podcast. I'm Adi Jaffe.
And I'm Sophie Jaffe.
And I'm coming to you after a 4-day silent retreat.
Yes.
I'm now the Buddha.
Yes, you are the Buddha now.
I've transcended.
4 days did you really well, actually.
Didn't they though?
Yeah.
My favorite part of the story is that when I was planning on going, I thought you were going to give me shit for wanting to go for 2 days. And you're like, no, you should go for 3.
Yeah.
I was like, I remember thinking to myself, like, is she just trying to get me out of the house? Or does she really think it would help me? No, you really knew that it would help me.
I think after the better part of my adult life doing multiple retreats a year, either leading them or going to them myself, I know the magic and the layers that it peels off and how badly it was just, honestly, it was a selfless desire. Like, I just wanted you to be in that light and be in that vibe and be just, especially with the way things are in the world right now and how hard it is and for everyone, but you've been working so hard, you never shut off. And if anything, you went even more intense during quarantine instead of what a lot of people did where they shut out a lot of the world. You actually went deeper into your head and deeper into work and deeper into being of service, which is beautiful in lots of ways, but also you didn't get a moment off.
Yeah.
So I knew that doing that and then going on vacation, we have a vacation coming up, I knew that that would be the perfect combination for you. So I'm just so glad that you got so much out of it, and we'll talk more about it. But
yeah, this is only the first of many.
Yeah.
But I'm actually not here. I'm energy and light. I think we're ready.
Yeah.
Is there a drum roll somewhere? Ta-da! Kristen P.P. Honest and real. I love this pod and how Dr. Jaffe and Sophie take a different approach to recovery than the standard recovery go-to. They're open and honest about their own struggles and offer in-depth advice about forging one's own path in recovery. Thank you guys for doing this podcast. It has been a saving grace for me. Well, thank you so much, Kristen. Sophie and I have been talking about, you've been talking about like making the recovery component of what we do really more central because it's such a huge part of our story.
Yeah.
My addiction before you, the sex addiction stuff we dealt with together, all that stuff. So thank you so much. I'm so happy that it resonated.
Yeah. And I think just a lot of people, including me, and we have an Instagram TV coming out soon about this, but when a D came to me and said, I cheated, or when I found inappropriate text messages that he texted someone else, like in all those moments, it's kind of like you want to point to the person and be like, this is all you. You did all these things. You are bad. You deserve to be punished. And I have no part in that. And that's just not the case. It's like when two little kids fight, I remember like when me and my brother used to fight, it was 50% of both of us. It isn't 100% of one person. It's communication. It's the way you treat each other. It's things leading up to it. It's so much. And
some of those things you don't even really know. It's not like we're saying you're being explicitly an asshole. My point though isn't about that. It's more in that we healed when I recognized that this is an us thing and this is an us journey, and that whatever Adi's going through affects me, whatever I'm going through affects him. So the minute that I kind of rolled my sleeves up and got to work and said, oh, I have a place in all of this. What can I do? What work can I do? What groups can I go to? What can I talk about with my therapist? What can I lean into? The minute that I took responsibility for being part of this dynamic was when we really started to accelerate our healing. Yeah.
I have a quote. So this is from Kylie, who's our guest today. She got a quote from Maya Luna on Instagram. And it says, How deeply can you savor? How fully can you receive? How completely can you allow satiation without chasing your hunger for more? When one single drop is an ocean of fulfillment, when the simple is the sanctuary and limitation is the refuge, the joy of remembering how to experience fullness, the liberation of letting it be enough, deeply, truly enough. And I just love that on the heels of you going away and actually being in that simplicity and letting the simplicity actually be the sanctuary.
Oh, that was my favorite part of the whole thing. We were talking before, like you weren't here when I came home, but like Alex said that when I showed up, it was like every single thing that I did was just intentional and like
present,
not in the search of something else. It was like, I am taking this action because this is the action that needs to be taken right now without, and I'm sure a lot of you listening can identify. It's like, as you're making the coffee or answering the email and making the breakfast and waking up the kids, and like you're doing 12 things at once, which means you're not really doing any of them mindfully, really. And so I talked about this on another podcast episode that I recorded for the Friday one, but like I was able to do that for my mornings, right? I've been able to kind of like etch an hour for myself every morning now, which is great. But I completely let that control go for the rest of the day. The rest of the day, I was just like, well, whatever comes up in front of my face, that's what I'll deal with. And I think what I realized on this retreat was that I have to take back that time. And that was a gift. And the less, the more, right? That's kind of what that quote is about.
Yeah, I remember someone saying something in a spin class. It sounds so silly, but they were like, don't let the bike ride you, you ride the bike. And that's life, right? Like, don't let life take you. Don't let your work take you. Don't let emails drag you in. All my notifications are off. Yes, you may struggle a little bit getting a hold of me, but you know what? I'm okay with that. And so are you. If there's an emergency, you know how to get a hold of me. You can FaceTime me. It comes through. That's my trick. We find little secrets, right? And it's like, I need for my own sacred being in the moment, I need to not be alerted to get out of the moment. I need people not to be able to get a hold of me. If I want to check my texts, I go in and check my texts. There's 21 texts when I go in there because it's been an hour, but like, that's okay.
I love that you've had 21 texts in an hour. That's like, I left a 4-day retreat and I probably had like 50 texts after 4 days.
The amount of things I manage, it's the way I want it to be. That's not true.
One of them was like you guys' chat and it was insane. But other than that one.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I love a full life. That's what I created. I have such a full, beautiful life with so many amazing friendships and relationships and layers and depth and 3 kids and busy lives and busy work. And I love doing that. But part of the beauty of it all is being able to really be present to each thing as I'm doing it. So I can't do that if things are beeping and buzzing every 2 seconds.
Yeah. I mean, I've eliminated like 90% of mine.
Yeah, it's a process.
And it's definitely made things easier. I think a lot of people just assume we have to be on call for everything. I had this thought, I don't remember if it was on the way back from the retreat or on the way there. A song played. I don't know if anybody's had this feeling before. Have you ever had this happen to you? But a song played and they say the year in the song. And so like, I think the song came out, it was like 2002 or something like that. And they say like, 02 or 2000. And I was like, oh shit. Like I was listening to this song 20 years ago and it really landed in a split second. Like, what? 20 years?
Yeah. And that's how quickly it happens.
Time just flies by. And if you just stay busy and just do the next thing in front of you, you will think about this again 20 years from now going, wait, what the fuck happened?
And I know that time is going to pass by and I know that I'm going to be on the other side of being a parent and say, man, that went by really quickly. But I do have to say, when you can savor the moments and stretch them out, it doesn't feel that it goes by. Like sometimes you can lengthen time, which is why it's about being intentional. When you're on vacation, I saw, you were away when I saw this, but I shared it on my Instagram. I said,
you did stuff while I was gone?
No, not at all. I had no fun. Okay. I posted it. It was something about like, with parenting. It said, you only have 18 summers with your little ones. Oh, make it count.
18 summers.
That's it.
So crazy.
Our 10-year-old is 10. We only have 8 summers left if we're lucky with him. 8 more. 8.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's crazy.
You know, and it's like, wow, that's the blessing in the quarantine time is these families that have, I mean, the amount of families I've heard that have family dinners for the first time and, 3 times a week, 5 times a week now, and they used to have none, and we're all on opposing schedules. It's beautiful. There's a beauty in that.
Absolutely. This relates to the conversation we're having here because she talks a lot about the mother wound.
Yep.
That you guys relate to that a lot.
Yeah. So Kylie talks, she has being is beautiful on Instagram, and she talks all about, she writes, she shares really inspiring, important content when it comes to, like Adi said, the mother wound, but also she has a podcast, and she's the co-founder of Zura Health. And she's just awesome. I love her work. Go check her out. Give her a follow. And whatever inspires you in this podcast, please tag her, tag Adi and I, tag Ignited. Let us know. Let us know where your aha moments were or what really sunk in. And yeah, we love you guys. Make sure that you leave us a review. We forgot to note that if you leave us a review and we read it on air, then we will give you a special package. So just know that. And we're so excited to share this podcast episode with you.
Hallelujah and amen. See you on the other side.
Bye. This episode of the Ignited podcast is brought to you by Philosophy Superfoods. The Philosophy offers cleanses and other nutritional products that are unlike any of the other supplements and detoxification programs on the market. Why? Because they actually nourish the body with whole, live, nutrient-rich foods instead of depriving you and leaving you hungry. Have you ever tried a cleanse only to find out that you can't make it through a whole day because you're starving? Ever try a superfood shake that made you nauseous because it was so disgusting you'd rather not eat? The Philosophy fix all that with a simple set of offerings that load up your body with nutrients while actually tasting good. Makes sense, right? Each of the Philosophy superfood and protein blends is vegan, raw, gluten-free, and has absolutely no filler ingredients. With over 15,000 satisfied customers, including some of the world's biggest celebrities like George Clooney, Gerard Butler, Lea Michele, and over 10 years of experience, this is the best stuff you can get. To buy some or find out more info, go to our website, thephilosophy.com. Well, we love what you're doing. We're just going to jump into it. So why don't you introduce yourself? Thank you for being here today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm Kylie McBeath, and so many things. I feel like in the last year specifically, it's 2020. So in 2019, I went through a series of initiations is how I really describe them. And in the rupture of my 4-year relationship, it was a really big invitation for me to look at all of my attachments. And that is including my business and the podcast, my mission, my purpose, who am I standing with? Am I in solidarity with Mother Earth, with humanity, with the marginalized communities? And it really was an eye-opening experience in that even in the last year, it's been a lot of unknown of like, I'm not moving forward with the business in the way that I was. And so for me right now, I'm kind of just riding the waves of doing my own internal work and going internal. I'm the co-founder of Zura Health, which is a digital integrative health platform that supports individuals who want to become trauma-informed, justice-informed health coaches, which has been a really beautiful way to share not only what I've learned, but also to highlight other people who are doing incredible work in supporting people and remembering who they are and remembering what really matters.
Yeah. Yeah. How did you feel like those experiences that you were just talking about that happened in 2019 is what catalyzed that work specifically? Or were you doing that before? Were you doing trauma-centric work before?
Yeah. So I got divorced in 2014. Okay. And that was like the first big rupture in my life. I call it my rock bottom moment. And it was the moment where I had to hit the pause button and say, how the heck did I get here? And how the heck do I never make it back here again? Because this is just, I mean, it shattered my whole identity of being the good girl, the perfect daughter, the perfect wife, the perfect, the perfect everything. And it was like, heartbreaking, but also necessary in that it really catalyzed me to start this inward journey. And I'd say for the past 8 years or so, I have been on a very inward path of peeling back the layers of trauma. And so that really, I mean, is layered because there's so many layers to this conversation specifically. But last year, the biggest catalyst with that was healing the mother wound and my core relationship with my mother. It hit a little bit of a bumpy road in the beginning of last year. And I was really examining how there were these invisible walls to really reclaiming my pattern, using my voice, and stepping into prosperity, if you will. And a lot of that was redirecting me into the mother wound. So the mother wound is, for the people who aren't familiar with that word or concept, is looking at how being a woman born in a patriarchal society over thousands of years has impacted not only the mother-daughter relationship, but also our identity as women, and how those defense mechanisms or the trauma responses or adaptations to being a woman born in a patriarchal society has impacted the mother-daughter bond and has interfered with the capacity to step into our power without fearing the abandonment of mother. Since, at least for me specifically, my mother was born into a generation where her father didn't believe that women went to school, that women were supposed to stay at home, be with the kids, and that's all beautiful, but there was no choice. There was no freedom to break out of those molds or out of those boxes. So when I started to step forward and break out of those molds and out of those boxes and kind of grow beyond or step into my power beyond, it really rippled in my family system. And I was being, not to get too in depth in that, but
I think let's get in depth. I think people connect to the specifics in the stories.
Yeah. So in stepping forward and using my voice to really unpack and reclaim my power, I triggered my mother. I triggered her unconscious rage. I triggered her unconscious grief that she had never felt or never witnessed or never gave herself permission to name. And without the context around what the mother wound was or around these invisible walls of the patriarchal system, I was the source that all the pain was being directed at. So in an effort to not feel that pain, it was like, let's make sure that we silence, suppress, repress, or potentially shame her so that she doesn't keep moving forward, because this is too painful. And so it was actually pretty effective in that when I was experiencing the backlash of reclaiming my voice and stepping into my power, that when I was met with the resistance and the emotional interference, I repressed back into my core wound, which is, I don't matter. My voice doesn't matter. I'm not loved. It's not safe for me to be me. It's not safe for me to step into my power. So it kind of sucked me all the way back into a very young state.
What were the tactics? What were the ways in which that kind of set of expectations or beliefs about what your role, Kylie, was to be in the world, and how you were sort of overstepping your bounds or trying to prove that you were somehow not bound by the rules? What were the ways in which the silencing happened?
Yeah, so I have a platform and I utilize my voice to share my experience. And I started talking about the mother wound and how I realized that this invisible wall was actually stopping me from claiming more, from wanting more, from growing beyond what had been modeled in my family system. And so for me, that was like financial independence. That was financial abundance, and that was breaking through old codependent patterns in my relationships. So, and also what it was too is like disturbing the way the family system operated. So I was in patterns of deep enmeshment of like, I'm going to be the good girl. I'm still not going to rock the familial boat. I'm not going to bring forward all of the things I'm seeing in the family system because I might upset somebody, even though I was staying complicit in my own oppression. So I started to bring it forward. I started to talk about it. And I was being silenced through, a few ways. I still continue to use my voice, but just messages, text messages, and things along that nature of like.
Sophie, you had the same thing. That's why I was asking.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I went through, mine was very similar, like complete parallels when I claimed independence by moving to California from the East Coast to live with my dad. And to her, that was me choosing my father after, 12 years of living alone with her and having a lot of issues and problems along the way. But I think in her mind, I chose her by living with her all that time. So then the minute that I had my independence, I was 18, I moved to California to live with my dad and my stepmother. And a lot of jealousy came up around that for her. And we were estranged. We like barely talked other than arguing for a few years. And then there were some things with my relationship with my marriage now where she was judgmental and saying I was marrying my father and all of this stuff that was her own programming and her own thought processes that actually wasn't helpful. It wasn't helpful. And I got married, I had my first child, and I realized that I didn't want that toxic energy in his life or my life. And that in order for me to show up fully and be present for my son, who you just met for a moment, who's almost 10, so this was 10 years ago, I needed to have some real separation. And because we had never had boundaries, and because we needed a complete death and rebirth in our relationship, I didn't know if there would ever be a rebirth, to be honest. I had no blueprint. I had nowhere. That's why I love hearing people like you talk out on a public platform and give, real resources, because I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew in my gut that I needed an ending so that I could be present to my son and do things differently, because her influence is so powerful as my mother. And so, so we didn't talk for several years. And now we have a very new rebirth relationship that is very different than it was as a child. And the power play is more even, and it's more like love and respect, woman to woman, but that mother-daughter energy is kind of not as elevated. It's not as that powerful. Like she used that as a place of power, and everything came back to her around like, well, that's because you're my daughter. Well, that's because no, I'm just actually a very strong individual because I am my own being. And you had something to do with that. Absolutely. But you are not the end all be all of why I am a powerful, incredible human being. That is me.
Yeah.
So I very paralleled, challenging, difficult, scary place to navigate. I felt very alone and very, not ostracized. I just felt like I couldn't relate to, like, no one else was doing this with their mothers. Like no one else, like, what's wrong with me that I need to like completely leave a relationship with my mother of all people? Like, what does that say about me and the shame that goes into that? And this month that you're going to be featured in July is all about fuck shame. And that's
perfect.
Yeah. Just like a kind of slogan that Adi has created for his company, for his life's work in helping drug addicts and people that are going through recovery in all walks of life, people that go through trauma, and just how shame is the biggest obstacle. And Adi did a TED talk specifically about shame. And so that's what we really want to make all of July about. And that's what I'm hearing come through here is it's like, we've all got trauma in all different, I'll let you speak to that.
Yeah. So what was interesting in healing for me, the mother wound, is in looking at patriarchy in general and how we've lived in this system for thousands of years, and how the oppression of living in this type of system where, from religion all the way to government, where we're seeing this female as less than, or the feminine is less than. There's just been an extreme denigration, degradation, and exploitation and repression of the feminine and the feminine principle. And that's not necessarily, there are elements of that are gender specific, but there are other elements of that are also like, this also impacts men as well, because their inner feminine has also been repressed and shut down and not operating in its fullest expression. So I look at that and I actually think more subtly, there is a trauma response or a trauma imprint from living in this system for the amount of time that we have for women. And we almost don't even realize it. And it's almost now, at least in my experience, but also what I see in clients, is we start to internalize these narratives and we start to repress shame and minimize our own intuition, our own instincts, our own feminine wisdom in this culture, because that's what's been safe over time. Because if you didn't, I mean, historically, you were burned, you were exiled, you were called crazy, you were abandoned. Yeah. And so this is that next layer from the mother wound. Then you're like, oh, the patriarchy wound. And then you're like, oh, the Eve wound, our creation story. You know, like all the distortion.
It's all women's fault.
It's all women's fault.
You are the reason we were banished from the Garden of Eden. I mean, for crying out loud, what's wrong with you?
Right?
Just don't eat the apple. In this, I love that you're touching on the systemization, because obviously while we're recording this, we're still in, and by the time this comes out, we will still be having conversations about the racial inequality and all the things that are happening in this country. And it's the same idea, right? It's the systemization of a standard of what you're supposed to be like. And then the notion of rebelling, or actually just the notion of being uncomfortable with that standard, first of all, enough to make noise about it, then enough to start screaming out about it, and then creating change. And, you look back to the suffrage movement and just the idea. And if you look back at the suffrage movement and the resistance there was to the idea that women should even have the ability to have a voice in politics, like why women aren't for politics, women are to stay home and bear children. How dare you even suggest? And I have this workshop that I give every Friday, and I talk about medicine and systematic minimization of power. And I mention women. I talk about primarily around addiction because that's my field. But one of the examples I give is, everybody's heard of somebody being called being hysterical, or she's hysterical, and words matter. And so when somebody's being hysterical, what you're emulating is a disorder, a disease, a mental health condition from the 17 and 1800s, being hysteria, a condition almost exclusively diagnosed to women, because hyster, the core, the root of hysteria comes from uterus, right? Hysterectomy, hysteria. And so the idea is, really the medical community believed that women were having these mental health issues because their uterus was moving in their body and making their internal organs dysregulated, so much so that they were fainting and being depressed and didn't want to get out of bed. They were having crying spells. They were anxious. They were upset. They wouldn't be able to have sex with their husbands. And when I speak on this in this workshop, I say to people, now let's look back at women's lives in the 17 and 1800s and see if they had a reason to cry or be depressed or faint, or maybe not want to have sex with their husbands, who could have completely ignored them, beaten them, yelled at them, taken all power away from them, like financial power and literally any decision-making power in the household. And they were locked in because they couldn't leave, because being a divorcee at the time was excommunication from your community. You were never going to remarry. Nobody wanted, other women didn't want to talk to you because you were risky to them. It essentially ostracized you if you dared speak up against your husband. And so they were essentially second-grade citizens, enslaved in their own home, beaten, taken advantage of. And then they had symptoms of that, like crying or being anxious or being depressed. And in order to explain, I'd be fucking depressed. And in order to explain that away, we gave it a mental health disorder. We said, oh, well, they have hysteria. They have this thing. Their uterus is making them upset. And And I see the same thing, this is how systems keep people in line is, hey, if you cry too much, we're going to tell you have this problem, and we're going to make everybody sure that they know that your brain doesn't work right. And if you do it too long and you don't get it under control, you're going to go to a mental hospital. And then really sucks to be, you think it's bad to be at home bearing children and being beaten by and raped by your husband and not being given rights. Just wait till we lock you up in a cell and take you away from all of that. So you better behave. And the parallels between that and criminal justice system in Black society are hopefully very obvious to every single person listening right now. And so I really appreciate these conversations. We just had a conversation with another amazing woman about period judgment and the role of sort of regular biological cycles in women and how those have been marginalized and making women sort of less than.
Yeah, that's something where there has been so much distortion and shaming and just complete a lack of understanding of how sacred the womb is, how sacred a woman's capacity to birth life and menstrual blood and all of the conditioning around that, feeling gross, feeling discarded, feeling like, oh my gosh, that's heartbreaking when I sit with that. Cause I was that girl that was like terrified that I just got my period. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm a woman and I'm terrified to be a woman in this society. Like it wasn't conscious. It was subconscious. It was like subtle, but shame keeps the system alive. Because if I believe I'm broken, I'm unlovable, then I have to fix myself. And then I have to, okay, how am I going to do that in this culture? Well, I'm going to consume things. I'm going to continue to change the way I look. I'm going to continue to hire and read and buy things to fill this inner void that I'm broken, that I'm less than, that there's something wrong with me. That's all a lie.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with you. You're wounded. You've been traumatized by living in this oppressive system that has denigrated you, that has exploited you. And that goes in correlation with, with all of us. Some of us are obviously more privileged in this system. Speaking as a white woman who is cisgendered, is like, I'm aware that I have some privileges in the system in the way that it's systematically set up. However, I still think like, even if we go even bigger than the system, is like, we're all being oppressed in various degrees by the notion that we're broken and that in order to be valuable in this world, that you have to be a good provider, you have to, all of these various different things, and you have to look this way, and your body has to look this way, your beauty has to look this way in order to be valid or in order to be lovable. And it's like, what if we just flip that on its head? What if we're like, hey, there's nothing wrong with me?
So we talk about these issues a lot. I feel like Soph and Kylie, in the context of, our relationship has been through a lot. When we were dating, I cheated. Sophie broke up with me. We ended up getting back together. There were kind of repeated cycles of different forms, like digital forms, and all these different forms of infidelity. We did a lot of deep relationship work, trying to resolve those. And then Sophie talks quite a bit. Sophie ended up cheating later, like 5 years later, 5 or 6 years later in our relationship. And one of the things, Soph, and I want you to kind of speak to this and definitely correct me if I'm not saying it right, but one of the things you always say is that the thing you got the most, other than revenge, out of the cheating was an equalization, like an equalizing. You were kind of put up on a pedestal. I was the one that always screwed up, and you were sort of this martyr. And to Kylie's point earlier, she was saying she was always a good girl. She was always the one that did the right thing. And you talk about that quite a bit, about how that helped you, first of all, understand me in different ways, but also re-regulate people's expectation about you. And so I'm wondering, in the context of women are weaker, women are less in control, women are fill in whatever
fragile
standards I'm not seeing because I'm not affected by them as much. I'd love to kind of go deeply into how do we reclaim power? What does that look like? What was the role of the cheating? All that stuff.
Yeah. I can speak to my experience, and I want to hear from you, because I think that this directly relates to the work you do with shadow work. I had never, ever looked at anything that had to do with my own shadow work. I want to say 25 21, the first time I heard about Adi's cheating. We were just dating at that point. We broke up for a year. We got back together. We went into therapy. I did all the right things. I checked off all the boxes. I definitely was not embodied in any of it. I was completely in my head and completely like just going off what I knew, which wasn't very much. And just listening to my like intelligent, wise, PhD, soon to be husband that like had been through addiction before in drug form. So I'm like, oh, like he knows what's going on. I'll just follow his lead blindly. And that's all I knew what to do. No one handed me a rule book. I was figuring it all out on my own. And then we were pregnant with our first child, and there were more lies and more things, and we were married, and like, how are we back here again? And he fell to his knees, and that was one of the rebalancing of power, right? He fell to his knees and finally said, I need some help. I need to actually once and for all, it's all connected here. The drugs, the girls, the cheating, the hiding, all of it. He figured it out for himself, which is part of the process as well. As the person doing that needs to really look within. Before that, it was kind of pointing the finger at me and what our issues were. And just owning our own side of the street. And that was when I started to kind of scratch the surface of shadow work and go to my own meetings and figure out what my place was in a world of attracting people with these behaviors in my life. And then we did work, we went to therapists, very streamline cleaning up our act. And then about 5 years after that, I think I was 30, I'm 36 now. On New Year's Eve, I cheated on Adi. And I was intoxicated, not to blame that at all. Just setting the scene, and it happened. And in the moment, I was very aware that I shouldn't be doing it for hurting Adi.
Yeah.
But there was a deep knowing that this was a good thing. And I remember in the moment being like, this is fucked up.
Yeah.
And it needs to happen. And that deep knowing of intuition and tapping into my intuition, even though it was terrifying because I had never had a one-night stand. I'm married at this point with 2 kids.
Yeah.
That was so long ago. Who am I to bring that back up? That was so long ago. Aren't we done with that? We've talked about it for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. Shouldn't I be healed? This was the last layer of my healing.
Yeah.
And truly, it rebalanced the power. Truly, it rebalanced him not being in the wrong, quote unquote, that right and wrong. And for the first time in my life, I dug into the shadow because that was my breaking point. That was my rock bottom.
Yeah.
And as I learn from Adi every day, the rock bottom gives you a lot of clarity and a lot of hope and a lot of now we get to roll up our sleeves and get to work. And that's what it offered to me. And now it's 6 years later and I trust him full-heartedly. I had to fall that hard. I had to be in quote unquote his shoes of having sex with someone I didn't love because I had so much judgment around it. And society was like that. I was that person being like, it is wrong to have sex with someone that you don't love. And who are these women? Who are these men with so much judgment? And it knocked me off my pedestal and gave me such a slap in the reality face. And I'm so grateful for it. And I know that you do shadow work. So I want to segue to that. And just that's when I dug in for the first time in my life and how vital that is to stay in it.
Yeah. I really acknowledge you for the way you both are contextualizing your, first of all, to even get there, to get that frame is really a testament to the work and the love that you both have, not only for yourselves, but each other and your family. So I really acknowledge you for that.
Thank you.
And that was actually my entry point into shadow work as well. I cheated on my husband. At a Christmas party, intoxicated. I tried to pull the naive card. I didn't know what was happening, but of course I knew what was happening. And it was so interesting, Sophie, in the way you just described it. And I'm so happy that you were even in tune enough to realize the deeper layers of what was happening. So for me, it was very clear. It was like, if you do this, your whole world's going to implode. I felt so trapped in my world that I didn't care.
Yeah.
I was like, I'd rather the whole world explode than me stay in this position. Because I also needed to shatter the identity around being the perfect, around needing to be the good girl, because I was like so suffocated in that box and I was over it. So that opened the doorway to going within and to really sitting with the shadow. And the book that really catalyzed my whole journey on that was Romancing the Shadow by Dr. Connie Zweig. Incredible book that looks at, all of these repressed parts of who we are. And that can be not only what we might deem in our society as ugly, but also the positive parts: joy, play, sensuality, sexuality, pleasure, shame, grief, anger. Anger was in my shadow for a majority of my life. Not until last year did I have an access point to clean anger where I could actually protect myself in a way that felt really whole and really clean. And that was a really big invitation to reclaim that part that had been repressed for so long. So shadow work is imperative if we're going to climb through and dismantle all of the narratives, but all of the wounds that keep us blocked from deep, intimate, trustworthy relationships. And I think, when we talk about systems, and I'm a pretty big macro thinker, but it really does boil down to our relationships.
Yeah.
It really is like, are you humble enough to own your side of the street? To look within and to be like, oh, there's my shadow. Like, and that was ugly. Like, I'll give an example. And this is how women, the feminine and the distorted, I call it, some call it shadow feminine, but it's like distorted feminine because it's the way we've accessed power in the system is through our sensuality and sexuality. Right. And so it's like when I hook in with, on that hook of, well, I'm going to be overtly sexual and I'm going to use the allure of my body, of my sexuality to hook in to that guy or to get that attention or validation or status or power. Like that's how historically I've had to have resourced power is really the use of my body because I wasn't accessing power from a more integrated place. But until I realized that I was accessing power from overt sexualization, did it really become an entry point into, okay, what does power look like? And not only naming that is important, but because I also think the shadow or the distorted masculine is a lot of power, domination, control over the feminine in relational dynamics as well. And so it's like, how can men start to name that? Because they're also, because men can also, at least in my experience, can hook in with monetary or status or ways to be like, oh, well, I gave you this. So now there's this unconscious, you owe me or obligation or X. And we see this even in research when a man buys a woman a drink, like the woman feels obligated. Like unconsciously, sometimes there's an imbalance of power there.
Well, I think, so I think reciprocity or the concept that if you give me something, I owe you is a big human thing. But I think what you're bringing up is important, which is historically, the man was the one that had the resources to give the woman. Now, again, I'm drawing some parallels a lot of times here, but it's the same conversation we're having about race, right? It's like, saying to women, well, pick yourself up by your bootstraps. And if you want equality, go get it. It's like, well, you're not letting me into schools and I can't really have a job except for menial jobs serving men. So up until literally the recent 5 to 10 years, maybe 15 years, the idea of a woman serving as a CEO as the head of an organization was antithetical to the entire way that it was organized. So it's easy to say we're for equality, but I'm going to say it like this.
Yeah.
Some idiot was talking with Sophie earlier today, and they're like giving these examples to show that the issue we're having in society right now is not a racial issue, it's a money issue. Yeah. And so they used people with wealth, Black wealthy people, as an example. And I was saying to Sophie, sure, there are exceptions to the rule. And you just pointed out like the 5 rich Black people, three, like the 3 rich Black people you've seen in the news. You don't know any of them. You just literally just pick them out of the fucking news because
they're Black.
And that's all you have. And that's this sort of like, well, look at those people. They've been able to do it. Therefore, there's no problem. But if you sat down and actually looked at the, Forbes 1,000 richest people list and just did a very simple analysis, right? Like how many men are there? How many of them are white? How many women are there? How many of them are white? And if you just did that analysis, I guarantee right now as we're sitting here, I should go back. I should do it after this. And we will have a summary for y'all in the show notes about this. But
I think it's like 97% or something.
Yeah. The system is equal when the evidence you have in front of you is of equality. And that's sort of where the rubber meets the road, unless, and I think this is why I was getting to this power dynamic and reciprocity between men and women and in general, right? Unless you really do hold a core deep belief that you're better than the other. Like,
superiority.
Yeah. Like if you're a man, you're like, well, yeah, but women can't do what I do. Yeah. Then you explain the disequality, the inequality. Yeah. You explain it by the rationale of capacity. Like, well, but men are just better able to run companies.
Right.
Women, again, something we just talked about. Like, women have their cycle and their hormones are all out of whack.
25% of the year
for a part of their month. So it's like
we can't make decisions.
What if a woman would need to make a really important decision in a company during her period? I'm like, motherfucker, she raised your kids doing that shit the entire time. You didn't have a problem with that. You weren't like, hey, honey, you're on your period. I'll take over the children for the next 20.
Right, exactly.
I didn't see you stepping up there. So we just we just create these false realities.
Yeah.
And and men have this resources to offer. And so they if you come from that framework, that thing you talked about before, like the learned understanding of how things are supposed to happen, then it is an even exchange, right? Like I'll buy you a home and I'll support you and I'll buy you the clothes and the purse and the shoes you want and I'll feed you. And in return, you will become mine, right? Like I will pay to own you, kind of a thing.
Exactly that. And I'll also have to like ask the question, okay, what is power in our system? It's been monetary. That's how we've really defined power. And why? So it's monetary, it's status, it's I'd say that those two things are kind of what have considered to be power. Yeah. And I think that's false power. Like, sure, that is the power or the currency in this system that's going to get those base needs met. And since many of us are severed from where I think we can really resource true power, which is through family, community, through a deeper connection to the circle of life, Mother Earth, and the cosmos. Yeah. Since we've been severed from all of that, and market and state have become mother and father, we are forgetting that. I think we're truly forgetting the purpose as to why we're here, but also we're spending all of our energy in trying to climb this illusory pyramid so that we can have these things that will get us freedom, that will get us happiness, all of our base needs met. And I'm kind of really sitting with how, the colonial capitalist white supremacist system is operating right now, and how it really is. One, it's toxic and oppressive, but also it's keeping us focused in the wrong direction. Like, it's just feeding a model that only consumes, that only is driven off of shame, really. that's driven off of soul loss and trauma.
Yeah.
And this scarcity mindset of there's not enough. But you see a lot of the abundance and all that stuff, and that's great. But it's like, that's still not taking into account how the system operates and what it's diverting our attention to. So for me in my work, it's like, I know this is a little bit of a bigger context here, but it's how, like, to whom and what do I belong, and how am I generating culture?
So let's answer that question. So kind of like, because this is the work you're doing, you're training other coaches in opening their minds so that they can help other people, etc. You had that experience, your old world exploded, right? What you needed or wanted out of that experience. And my guess, I don't know if I'm right or not, I could be totally off on this, but my guess is just like Sophie, there was like this moment of reckoning of like, okay, well, how do I try to keep walking on the side that actually takes into account my needs, my desires, my truth internally, hopefully in a more aware, more embodied, more conscious, ongoing reflection, so that I don't end up again in a situation 2 years, 10 years, 20 years down the line, realizing that I'd picked a different path back then, but had never really checked back in with myself and ended up digging myself into another hole that I was again unhappy with. Because if you're experiencing anything like ours, there's a constant unraveling and rediscovery of what you want as you discover new things, right? You learn more things about yourself, and then you go, "Oh, absolutely. I'd like to pivot, please."
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big fan of pivoting, even though in the very beginning of my life I was not. I was very rigid, very structured. Like, I needed that external control in order to feel safe. But now, as I've created more capacity in my nervous system, and I've had the opportunity and the privilege to heal from layers of trauma, it's really has invited a deeper inquiry around the feminine principle in general, of really getting into right relationship with the earth and really generating culture. So last year, this is when this all came online for me. After I separated from my partner, it kind of ruptured my which I was doing a lot of work, but it ruptured me even to a deeper level of who am I truly, and what do I really want? And I don't think I'd ever really sat with that, because I was young. I was like, what do I want? I haven't even really experienced that much in my life. And I just turned 30 last year. And I think it's a pretty big expectation to put on people to figure out what they want at young ages, or even at any point. It's like it's open for growth, for evolution, to pivot. So what's been rising to the surface for me in unpacking, the wound of whiteness, the racialized trauma, the wound of colonialism, like in all of the isms, is, okay, how can we get back into not only solidarity with all of humanity, but into right relationship with self, and also with Mother Earth. And to be honest with you, it's actually way more simple than the big picture. At least for me, it has felt more simple, in that I am radically committed to living in alignment with my soul, and also practicing and making it prioritizing embodiment and my intuition and instinct. Like, I no longer minimize that. I no longer am in an internal battle with my own wisdom. I trust myself. And so it's like self-trust is like the foundation of all of this. And, you can't really trust yourself when your ground is polluted with shame. So it's like, you got to do the excavating. You got to excavate all the poison that made you believe that you were less than, that you were broken, that there's something wrong with you, that you're unlovable. And then you can start to rebuild that foundation on trust. And for me, trust has been cultivated through a concept like self-containment. So really getting in the container of me. So bringing all of my energy that has been fragmented and focused on the family system, or focused on the attachment to Instagram, or the attachment here. And really, not that there's anything wrong with that, but just like really bringing my energy inwards and starting to cultivate a deeper relationship with my body, my intuition, my wisdom. My womb has actually been a big part of that journey. As a woman, it's like my womb is wisdom, and really consecrating the womb and treating my sacred treating my energy, my sexual organs and my sexuality as sacred. And that's not to get distorted through the religious frame, but it's really just honoring my vessel. It's honoring my body and then listening to the truth that is rising. And sometimes it's not, I think a lot of us, even me historically, fear naming the truth because we think once we name the truth, we have to change. Like there's something, and sometimes that's the case. So it's a little scary. So we kind of want to just, let's just not acknowledge that. Mm-hmm. But, again, that when we don't acknowledge what's true, even if it's a story, even if it's a feeling or emotion, it just keeps widening the gap between our true self and the self we think we have to be. Right. And so in that gap, we create internal chaos. And that's what leads us into those supernova implosions, because it's like, oh, I'm so trapped in this identity of who I think I need to be that I'd rather blow my whole world up than stay here.
Yeah, I posted something. It was a quote from someone else that said, normalize changing your opinion on something after learning new information. It's okay. I promise.
I love that.
It's phenomenal. The website's phenomenal and the brand posted that. And it's just so true. Like we are constantly evolving. We're constantly changing. We're okay to pivot. It's okay to change our minds. But it's also imperative that along the way, we claim what is ours and what is true and present for us in this moment. Yeah. With the openness of, and I know I will change and grow and evolve past this point.
Yes, I hear you. And I love what you just said, because you're so right. It's in this moment. It's what is true for me right now. Can I just acknowledge what is true for me, even to myself?
Yeah. Or there's a settling that comes with that.
There's a settling. There's like okay, at least I can trust myself to name what is present.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's weird, right? If we think about it, if we were not willing to pivot, we'd still believe in Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, that our parents are superheroes who could do no wrong. I mean, we've all done this. Everybody listening right now has changed their beliefs, their view of the world many times over. It's just that as we grow older, for some reason, we lose sight maybe of the fact that even the perspective we've developed right now is not the right perspective. It's not our way of living right now is not the right way to do it. We will change, hopefully. We will evolve. The people around us will continue doing the same. But sometimes it can feel, I don't know, probably scary. Sometimes it just feels scary to willfully move into the next change instead of what I think happened oftentimes in life. And that is we weren't the ones in control of that change, right? So you would have wanted to continue believing in Santa Claus until somebody told you it wasn't true. And it could have been a friend in kindergarten or your parents in third grade. It doesn't matter what happened. At some point, somebody let you in on that secret and then you knew something else. Well, now as adults, sometimes it's our responsibility to go do the work that helps us understand the world from a different vantage point and allows us to expand.
Yeah. What in your experience has supported you in expanding your capacity to sit with change, to sit with a shift of belief or identity?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I think having a support system has really helped me with that. Having a partner that supports that, but also having powerful women in my life that are my spiritual teachers and mirrors and expanders, and just really leaning into that being the only absolute that is, we will continue to evolve, and being around people that are constantly evolving and changing too. So I think having that supportive circle and tribe really helps me throughout the years, because I've gone through so many deep, intense shifts and changes, identities, and publicly. So having my tribe of humans that are there, including a D, to just say, own it. That's why we love you. Own it. That's why we love you. Over and over again. And me telling myself, I love myself as this person, even if it's scary and hard. That's what makes me, is leaning into these difficulties and emerging on the other side, like rebirthed as the next best version. And like finding words to actually be able to embody the feeling. Like change, evolution, up leveling. That was my 2019 word, was just up level. We bought a house. We got new friendships. We, traveled. We just so many up leveling things that let me put a label on it because I'm ready to step in, even though it's really hard and the most gut wrenching, intense, crazy time. And again, here we are again, as a global up leveling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is global, galactic initiation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like a lot of stuff. We're crossing the threshold and a lot of stuff isn't coming with.
Yeah. And last year's experience for us and for me, that up leveling in my personal life of taking myself to my edge and then moving past it and falling and making mistakes and having anxiety attacks and all of it prepared me for this moment so that my nervous system is ready. I'm good. I need 10 minutes of yoga and I'm right back to the grounds, and it's knowing how to, pace myself, but also knowing that my level of depth of capacity to hold space for those suffering, for my own mistakes, for calling myself on it, for hard conversations for the greater good of up leveling. That was last year's training camp. And now I'm here and the last 36 years, I guess. But, just knowing that and if you're someone who's listening who hasn't had a lot of challenges in this way and you're feeling frazzled by the world, just know, come as you are and give to your ability to give. This is not a competition of who's doing what, where in their families, in their lives, in their communities. Just do something. Just do something. And it starts within learning, educating, and consuming media, books, everything so that you can change yourself. And then we'll go from there. Yeah. So we always ask our guests 5 questions.
Oh, yay.
You want to ask the first one, Adi?
Sure. Doesn't have to be in the context of what we talked about today, just general life. What is the best advice you feel like you've ever received?
One of my girlfriends, it was just hey, just trust what you know. And it'll always lead you in the right direction. And it always has.
I love it.
If we really listen.
Maybe related to this, maybe not. What has been one of your proudest moments to date?
Yeah, I think my proudest moment, the more quiet in nature is really just feeling incredibly anchored and grounded in my voice, in my truth, in my body. I'm incredibly grateful and proud of myself for actually doing the work to get here so that I could share my mission with the world.
Love that. What has been one of your most challenging or difficult moments?
I'd say that my divorce was probably the most challenging in that it was like a forced exile out of my family system, and my family system was my rock. And really sitting with needing to break down this concept of the sinner and the homewrecker. There's so many different labels, but that was actually one of the most challenging. And I think it's taken me years to really climb out of the shame that I was in because of those decisions and how society and our overculture has judged me for making certain decisions in my life.
Absolutely. And then what about self-care? Do you have a certain practice you do every day? Maybe when you're spiraling and going into a not great place, something that brings you out of it?
Yeah. So for me, all of my practices that really support me when my nervous system is activated or I'm spiraling is embodiment practices. So I like to dance, and I also really like using my hands, touch. So hand on heart, hand on womb. And I always say to myself, I'm here, I'm listening, I've got you. I'll breathe with you until we're one, just to really bring me back into the present moment or sitting in nature.
The best.
I love it. And then last but not least, this podcast is called Ignited. What ignites you?
There's so many things that ignite me, but I'd say that the core of all of that is liberation, not only personal healing, but collective liberation.
I love it.
Beautiful. Thank you for your time and energy and work in the world.
Thank you. Really appreciate this.
Yeah, it's amazing. We'll have links to everything. And we'll be really looking forward to following you as you keep pivoting and
growing and evolving.
Yeah.
And all the things.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So much love. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for listening to the Ignited podcast. We were so happy to have you along for this ride. Please go and subscribe to this. Leave us a review. We love hearing from you. And if you want more, don't forget to go to ignited.com, where all the podcast episodes are available with show notes and so many of the little details and links from each one of these interviews. And you can look at all the future events that we have going on, all the things that make Ignited so special, even beyond this recording. Again, thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next week.